flowers up from summer and sweet dripping off me before I even knew her name. La la la, it felt like oh la la la, yeah. No, sapphire moonlight, we danced for hours in the sun, tequila sunrise. Her body feel right in my hands. La la la, it felt like oh la la la, yeah. I love it when you call me señorita. I wish I could pretend I didn't need ya, but every touch is true. It's true. Ooh, I should be running. Ooh, you know I love it when you call me señorita. I wish it wasn't so damn hard to leave ya, but every touch is true. It's true. Ooh, I should be running. Ooh, you keep me coming for you. Like in the hotel, there's just some things that never change. You say we just friends, but friends don't know the way you taste. La la la. Cause it knows me a long time coming, doesn't let me fall. Who when you listen, dress me hooked on your tongue. Ooh, if you can sit still, don't stop. I love it when you call me señorita. I wish I could pretend I didn't need ya, but every touch is true. It's true. Ooh, I should be running. Ooh, you know I love it when you call me señorita. I wish it wasn't so hard to leave ya, but every touch is true. It's true. Ooh, I should be running. Ooh, you keep me coming for ya. All along I've been coming for ya, and I hope it means something to you. Call my name, I'll be coming for ya. Coming for ya. For ya. Oh, she love it when I come. Oh, yeah. Ooh, I should be running. Ooh, you keep me coming for ya. I don't wanna know who's taking you home, home, and loving you so. The way I used to love you. Oh, I don't wanna know who's taking you home, home, and loving you so. The way I used to love you. Oh, I don't wanna know. Wasted. And the more I drink, the more I think about you. Oh no, I can't take it. Baby, every place I go reminds me of you. But do you think of me, of what we used to be? Is it better now that I'm not around? My friends are acting strange, they don't bring up your name. Are you happy now? Are you happy now? I don't wanna know who's taking you home, home, and loving you so. The way I used to love you. Oh, I don't wanna know who's taking you home, home, and loving you so. The way I used to love you. Oh, I don't wanna know. And every time I go out, yeah, I'm hearing from this one, hearing from that one, that you got someone new. I see but I don't believe it. Even in my head, you're still in my bed. Maybe I'm just a fool. Do you think of me, what we used to be? Is it better now that I'm not around? Friends are acting strange, don't bring up your name. Are you happy now? Are you happy now? I don't wanna know who's taking you home, home, love me so. The way I used to love you. Oh, I don't wanna know who's taking you home, home, love me so. The way I used to love you. Oh, is taking you home, 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 home. I'm loving you so, 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 so. The way I used to love you, oh, don't wanna know, no, no, no. It's taking you home, 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 home. I'm loving you so, 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 so. The way I used to love you, oh, don't wanna know, no, no, no. It's taking you home, 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 home. I'm loving you so, 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 so. The way I used to love you, oh, don't wanna know. Oh, yeah. The way I used to love you, oh, don't wanna know.
Sabes que ya llevo un rato mirándote. Tengo que bailar contigo hoy. Vi que tu mirada ya estaba llamándome. Muéstrame el camino que yo voy. Tú eres el imán y yo soy el metal. Me voy acercando y voy armando el plan. Solo con pensarlo se acelera el pulso. Oh yeah, ya me está gustando más de lo normal. Todos mis sentidos van pidiendo más. Esto hay que tomarlo sin ningún apuro. Despacito, quiero respirar tu cuello despacito. Deja que te diga cosas al oído, para que te acuerdes si no estás conmigo. Despacito, quiero desnudarte a besos despacito. Firmo en las paredes de tu laberinto y hacer de tu cuerpo todo un manuscrito.
Santos y Yedes.
Quiero ver bailar tu pelo, quiero ser tu ritmo. Que le enseñes a mi boca tus lugares favoritos. Déjame sobrepasar tus horas de peligro, hasta provocar tus gritos y que olvides tu apellido.
Si te pido un beso, ven dámelo. Yo sé que estás pensándolo, llevo tiempo intentándolo. Me miento dando y dándolo. Sabe que tu corazón conmigo te hace pam pam. Sabe que esa beba está buscando de mi pam pam. Ven, prueba de mi boca para ver cómo te sabe. Quiero ver cuánto amor a ti te cabe. Yo no tengo prisa, yo me quiero dar el viaje. Empezamos lento y después salvaje. Pasito a pasito, suave suavecito. Nos vamos pegando poquito a poquito. Cuando tú me besas con esa destreza, yo que eres malicia con delicadeza. Pasito a pasito, suave suavecito. Nos vamos pegando poquito a poquito. Y es que esa belleza, un rompecabezas, pero pa' montarlo aquí tengo la pieza. Hey.
Despacito, quiero respirar tu cuello despacito. Deja que te diga cosas al oído, para que te acuerdes si no estás conmigo. Despacito, quiero desnudarte a besos despacito. Firmo en las paredes de tu laberinto y hacer de tu cuerpo todo un manuscrito. Quiero ver bailar tu pelo, quiero ser tu ritmo. Que le enseñes a mi boca tus lugares favoritos. Déjame sobrepasar tus horas de peligro, hasta provocar tus gritos y que olvides tu apellido. Despacito, vamos a hacerlo en una playa en Garachico, hasta que las olas griten ay bendito, para que mi sello se quede contigo.
A lo canario, pasito, suave, suavecito. Si me dejo pegando poquito a poquito.
Que le enseñes a mi boca tus lugares favoritos.
Pasito a pasito, suave, suavecito. Nos vamos pegando nosotros en Canarias.
Provocar tus gritos y que
Despacito.
olvides tu apellido.
Hey.
Despacito.
I stay up too late, got nothing in my brain.
That's what people say. That's what people say. And I go on too many dates, but I can't make them stay. At least that's what people say. And that's what people say. But I keep cruising, can't stop, won't stop moving. It's like I got this music in my mind saying it's gonna be alright. Cause the player's gonna play, 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 and the haters gonna hate, 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 hate. Baby, I'm just gonna shake, 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 shake. I shake it off, I shake it off. Heartbreaker's gonna break, 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 and the faker's gonna fake, 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 fake. Baby, I'm just gonna shake, 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 shake. I shake it off, I shake it off. I'll never miss a beat. I'm landing on my feet, and that's what they don't see. That's what they don't see. I'm dancing on my own. I'll make the moves up as I go, and that's what they don't know. And that's what they don't know. But I keep cruising, can't stop, won't stop moving. It's like I got this music in my mind saying it's gonna be alright. Cause the player's gonna play, 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 and the haters gonna hate, 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 hate. Baby, I'm just gonna shake, 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 shake. I shake it off, I shake it off. Heartbreaker's gonna break, 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 and the faker's gonna fake, 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 fake. Baby, I'm just gonna shake, 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 shake. I shake it off, I shake it off. Yeah, I shake it off. Oh, hey, hey. 'Cause the player's gonna play, 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 and the haters gonna hate, hate, hate. They gonna hate. Shake, 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 shake. I shake it off, I shake it off. Heartbreaker's gonna break, 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 break. Fakers gonna fake, fake, yeah, they gonna fake. I'm just gonna shake, 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 shake. I shake it off, I shake it off. 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 I shake it off, I shake it off.
Shook you like a shot, thought that I could change you in the cold evening. Let a couple years water down how I'm feeling about you. And every time we talk, every single word builds up to this moment. I gotta convince myself, don't want it even though I do. You could break my heart in two, but when it heals and beats for you, I know it's forward but it's true. I wanna hold you when I'm not supposed to, when I'm lying close to someone else. You're stuck in my head and I can't get you out of it. If I could do it all again, I know I'd go back to you. I know I'd go back to you. I never got it right, playing and replaying old conversations, overthinking every word, and I hate it cause it's not me. And what's the point of hiding? Everybody knows we got unfinished business, and I regret it if I didn't say that this is what it couldn't be. You could break my heart in two, but when it heals and beats for you, I know it's forward but it's true. I wanna hold you when I'm not supposed to, when I'm lying close back to you.
We don't talk anymore. We don't talk anymore. We don't talk anymore like we used to do. We don't love anymore. What was all of it for? We don't talk anymore like we used to do. I just heard you found the one you've been looking for. I wish I would have known that wasn't me. 'Cause even after all this time I still wonder why I can't move on just the way you did so easily. Don't wanna know kind of dress you're wearing tonight. Is she holding on to you so tight the way I did before? I overdosed. Should've known your love was a game. Now I can't get you out of my brain. Oh, it's such a shame that we don't talk anymore. We don't talk anymore. We don't talk anymore like we used to do. We don't love anymore. What was all of it for? We don't talk anymore like we used to do.
I just hope you're lying next to somebody who knows how to love you like me. Must be a good reason that you're gone. Every now and then I think you might want me to come show up at your door. I'm just too afraid that I'll be wrong. Don't wanna know if you're looking into her eyes, if she's holding on to you so tight the way I did before. I overdosed. Should have known your love was a game. Now I can't get you out of my brain. Oh, it's such a shame. We don't talk anymore. We don't talk anymore. We don't talk anymore like we used to do. We don't love anymore. What was all of it for? Oh, we don't talk anymore like we used to do. Way I did before. I overdosed. Should have known your love is a game.
Now I can't get you out of my brain. Oh, it's such a shame.
We don't talk anymore. We don't talk anymore. We don't talk anymore like
we used to do. We don't love anymore. What was all of it for?
oh, we don't talk anymore like
We used to do.
I took a pill in Ibiza to show Avicii I was cool. And when I finally got sober, felt 10 years older. But fuck it, it was something to do. Living out in LA, I drive a sports car just to prove I'm a real big baller. 'Cause I made $1 million and I spent it on clothes and shoes. But you don't wanna be out like me, never really known why like me. You don't ever wanna step off the roller coaster and be all alone. You don't wanna ride the bus like this, never knowing who to trust like this. You don't wanna be stuck up on that stage singing, stuck up on that stage singing. All I know are sad songs, sad songs. All I know are sad songs, sad songs. I'm just a singer who already blew her shot. I get along with old timer 'cause my name's a reminder of a pop song people forgot. You don't wanna be out like me, never really know why like me. You don't ever wanna step off the roller coaster and be all alone. You don't wanna ride the bus like this, never know who to trust like this. You don't wanna be stuck up on that stage singing, stuck up on that stage singing. All
thought that I've been hurt before, but no one's ever left me quite this sore. Your words cut deeper than a knife. Now I need someone to breathe me back to life. Got a feeling that I'm going under, but I know that I'll make it out alive if I quit calling you my lover. Move on. You watch me bleed until I can't breathe. I'm shaking, falling onto my knees. And now that I'm without your kisses, I'll be needing stitches, tripping over myself. I'm aching, begging you to come help. And now that I'm without your kisses, I'll be needing stitches, just like a moth drawn to a flame. Oh, you lured me in, I couldn't sense the pain. Your bitter heart cold to the touch. Now I'm gonna reap what I sow. I'm left seeing red on my own. Got a feeling that I'm going under, but I know that I'll make it out alive if I quit calling you my lover. Move on. You watch me bleed until I can't breathe. I'm shaking, falling onto my knees. And now that I'm without your kisses, I'll be needing stitches, tripping over myself. I'm aching, begging you to come help. And now that I'm without your kisses, I'll be needing stitches. Needle in a thread, gotta get you out of my head. Needle in a thread, gonna wind up dead. Needle in a thread, gotta get you out of my head. Needle in a thread, gonna wind up dead. Needle in a thread, gotta get you out of my head. Needle in a thread, gonna wind up dead. Needle in a thread, gotta get you out of my head. Get you out of my head. You watch me bleed until I can't breathe. I'm shaking, falling onto my knees. And now that I'm without your kisses, I'll be needing stitches, tripping over myself. I'm aching, begging you to come help. And now that I'm without your kisses, I'll be needing stitches. I'm without your kisses, I'll be needing stitches. I'm without your kisses, I'll be needing stitches.
I've been trying cold. I'll be on my own for long enough. Maybe you can show me all your love. Maybe I'm going through withdrawal. You don't ever have to do too much. You can turn me on with just a touch, baby. I look around. Since it is good and empty, no one's around to get me. I can see clearly when you're gone. I say, ooh, I'm out of my mind. No, I can see the thing I feel your touch. I say, ooh, I'm rolling in the night. Oh, when I'm like this, you're the one I just, hey, hey. I'm running on a time. 'cause I can see the sun light up the sky. So I'd either rolling off a drive, baby. Oh, since it is good and empty, no one's around to get me. I can see clearly when you're gone. I say, ooh, I'm by the light. No, I can sleep until I feel your touch. I say, ooh, I'm drowning in the night. Oh, when I'm like this, don't know what I just. I'm just gonna thank you, let you know. I could never say it on the phone. We'll never let you go this night. I'm just gonna thank you, let you know. I could never say it on the phone. We'll never let you go this night.
Lost in your mind, I wanna know, am I losing my mind? Never let me go. If this night is not forever, at least we are together. I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone. Anywhere, whenever, apart but still together. I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone. Unconscious mind, I'm wide awake. Wanna feel one last time. Take my pain away. If this night is not forever, at least we are together. I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone. Anywhere, whenever, apart but still together. I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone, not alone, not alone. Wait a second, let me catch my breath. Remind me how it feels to hear your voice. Your lips are moving, I can't hear a thing. Living life as if we had a choice. Anywhere, anytime, I would do anything for you. Anything for you. Yesterday got away, melodies stuck inside your head. A song in every breath. Sing me to sleep now. Sing me to sleep. Won't you sing me to sleep now? Sing me to sleep. Remember me now, time cannot erase
can hear your whispers in my mind. I've become what you cannot embrace. Our memory will be my lullaby. Anywhere, anytime, I would do anything for you. Anything for you. Sing me to sleep now. Sing me to sleep. Won't you sing me to sleep now? Sing me to sleep.
Audio Jungle.
Did a fool 180, crazy, thinking about the way I was. Did the heartbreak change me? Maybe, but look at where I ended up. I'm all good already, so moved on. It's scary, I'm not where you left me at all. So, if you don't wanna see me, then still with somebody. If you wanna believe that anything could stop me, don't show up, don't come out, don't start caring about me now. Walk away, you know how. Don't start caring about me now. Aren't you the guy who tried to hurt me with the word goodbye? Though it took some time to survive you, I'm better on the other side. I'm all good already, so moved on. It's scary, I'm not where you left me at all. So, if you don't wanna see me, then still with somebody. If you wanna believe that anything could stop me, don't show up, don't come out, don't start caring about me now. Walk away, you know Don't start caring about me now. Don't show up, don't come out. Don't start caring about me now. Walk away, oh you know how. Don't start caring about me now. If you don't wanna see me, then still with somebody. Oh, if you wanna believe that anything could stop me. Here's to the ones that we got.
Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not.
Cause the drinks bring back all the memories of everything we've been through. Toast to the ones here today.
Toast to the ones that we lost on the way.
Cause the drinks bring back all the memories. And the memories bring back you. There's a time that I remember when I did not know no pain.
When I believed in forever and everything would stay the same.
Now my heart feels like December when somebody say your name.
Cause I can't reach out to call you, but I know I will someday, yeah.
And everybody hurts sometimes.
Everybody hurts someday, eh, eh. But everything gon' be alright. Go and raise a glass and say, eh.
Here's to the ones that we got.
Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not.
Cause the drinks bring back all the memories of everything we've been through. Toast to the ones here today. Toast to the ones that we lost on the way. Cause the drinks bring back all the memories. And the memories bring back you. Memories bring back you. There's a time that I remember when I never felt so lost.
When I felt all of the hatred was too powerful to stop.
Now my heart feels like an ember, and it's lighting up the dark. I'll carry these torches for ya,
but you know I'll never drop, yeah.
Everybody hurts sometimes.
Yeah, everybody hurts someday, eh, eh. But everything gon' be alright. Go and raise a glass and say, yeah.
Here's to the ones that we got.
Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not.
Cause the drinks bring back all the memories of everything we've been through. Toast to the ones here today. Toast to the ones that we lost on the way. Cause the drinks bring back all the memories. And the memories bring back you. Do, 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 do. Here's to the ones that we got.
Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not.
Cause the drinks bring back all the memories. And the memories bring back you.
It's been 24 hours, I need more hours with you. You spent the weekend getting even, oh. We spent the late nights making things right between us. But now it's all good, babe. Roll that backward, babe, and pay me close. Cause girls like you run around with guys like me till sundown. When I come through, I need a girl like you, yeah, yeah. Girls like you love running at me too. I want when I come through, I need a girl like you, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I need a girl like you, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I need a girl like you. I spent last night on the last flight to you. We took a whole day up, trying to get way up, ooh. We spent the daylight trying to make things right between us. And now it's all good, babe. Roll that backward, babe. Pay me close. Yeah, 'cause girls like you run around with guys like me till sundown. When I come through, I need a girl like you. Yeah, yeah, girls like you love fun and yeah, me too. What I want when I come through, I need a girl like you. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I need a girl like you. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I need a girl like you. Yeah, yeah. Maybe it's 6:45 and maybe I'm barely alive, and maybe this is really it for the last time. Maybe I know that I'm drunk, maybe I know you're the one. Maybe I'm thinking it's better if you drive. Oh, 'cause girls like you run around with guys like me till sundown. When I come through, I need a girl like you. Yeah, yeah, girls like you love funny, yeah, me too. What I want when I come through, I need a girl like you. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I need a girl like you. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I need a girl like you. Yeah, yeah.
I ain't worried about nothing, I ain't worried about nada. You're sitting pretty impatient, girl, I know you gotta put them in hours, baby, make it harder. You're sending pic after picture, girl, give me fire. You know I'm always on the night shift, and you can stand these nights alone. Yeah, you don't need no explanation, 'cause baby, I'm the boss at home. I ain't gotta go to work, 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 but I gotta put in work, 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 work. I ain't gotta go to work, 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 work. Let your body do the work, 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 work. We can work from home, oh, oh. We can work from home, oh, oh. Let's put it in motion, girl, give me a promotion. Let's make it feel like a vacation, turn a bed into an ocean. We don't need nobody, I just need your body. Nothing but sheets in between us, ain't no getting up early. You know I'm always on the night shift, and you can stand these nights alone. Yeah, you don't need no explanation, 'cause baby, I'm the boss at home. I ain't gotta go to work, 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 but I gotta put in work, 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 work. I ain't gotta go to work, 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 work. Let your body do the work, 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 work. We can work from home, we can work from home, we can work from home, yeah. We can work from home.
They say, oh my God, I see the way you shine. Take your hand, my dear, and place them both in mine. You know you stopped me dead when I was passing by, and now I beg to see you dance just one more time. Ooh, I see you, see you, see you every time. And oh my, I like your style. You make me wanna cry. And now I beg to see you dance just one more time. So they say, dance for me, dance for me, dance for me, oh, oh. I've never seen anybody do the things you do before. They say, move for me, move for me, move for me, eh, eh. And when you
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good day to all the attendees for another session of our Aurora Talk series. So before I proceed further, I would like to thank all of you for taking time on a Sunday morning to join today's talk on leadership and facilitation in adventure programming. For those who might not be familiar about this Aurora Talk series, let me briefly give you a little bit of info. So this talk series had been conducted on a regular basis from the start of this year and had already completed a total of 4 webinar sessions on various topics so far. So this talk series, including the one today, have been jointly and successfully organized by Aurora UPSI Co-Curricular Center UPSI. So as for me, I'm Mazuki Muhammad Yasim, the Director of Co-Curricular Center UPSI, who will also be undertaking the role of the moderator for the day. To spice up today's talk series, we are honored and pleased to have our globally distinguished panelist, Professor Dr. Simon Priest, who will be our keynote speaker for the topic being discussed today. So ladies and gentlemen, for your information, he is one of the author of the internationally acclaimed book titled Effective Leadership in Adventure Programming. So now allow me to provide a very brief background about our respected panelists. Dr. Simon Priest is a Canadian from Burnaby, British Columbia, which is near Vancouver. So his area of expertise include corporate training and development, wilderness resource management, and adventure travel and ecotourism. So in addition to being a dean, provost, vice chancellor, senior vice president, president, and commissioner, he has held full professorship in business management, online education, and recreation and leisure. He has received more than 15 awards for his teaching and research, including the Willie Ansel Award from the Association for Experiential Education. And he has been invited as a visiting scholar at about 30 international institutions. So inshallah, probably after this, we will discuss more on inviting Professor Dr. Simon Priest to Malaysia. So now the moment we have been waiting for, a warm welcome to our international panelist, Professor Dr. Simon Priest. Professor Dr. Simon Priest, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for taking time out of a day that should be, I guess, recreation for many. I appreciate you being here, and I hope to be able to share with you some valuable information and answer some of your questions. Today I'll be drawing from these two books. The book on the left is all about facilitation, and the book on the right is all about leadership. And these have been translated into a lot of different languages. We can certainly talk about translating parts of them into Malay in the future, if you'd like. But these are our sources for today, and the same information is in both books. We're going to start off by looking at leadership. And the research done in the 1980s and the 1990s came up with what I'd call a formula for a formula for leadership, but not sufficient research to tell us what the recipe is. So we know what goes into it, we just don't know how to make it as well as we would hope. The way this is organized is it's around the model of a brick wall. There are 3 blue bricks and 3 green bricks there. The blue bricks, I'm trying to say that. The blue ones are hard skills. That means it's like hardware on a computer. It's tangible. You can assess it. You can measure it. You can do a good job of knowing that someone has it. The green bricks are soft skills. They're a little less tangible. They're more difficult to assess, and it's often touch and go as to really knowing if someone is good at those things or not. The bricks are held together with cement or mortar, and these are what we call meta skills. Meta meaning a higher order and integrated with all of the other skills, so that when you have good cement holding the bricks together, you get a strong wall. And when you have those meta skills, it potentiates and accelerates and improves the leadership skills. The wall sits on a foundation, and that's a foundation of knowledge, a body of knowledge around the social psychology of human behavior, around the philosophy of what we're doing, based in evidence from the past, trends and issues from the present and the future, and perhaps some of our historical knowledge. But it can also include things like your knowledge of the Malay jungle or the alpine meadows at Cameron Heights, or the beaches and oceans around the peninsula or the island of Borneo. It's knowing those areas that provides you with a foundation for this. Within the bricks, we have to know how to do the activity. That's technical skills. We have to know how to do it safely without hurting people. That's the safety and risk management skills. And we have to know how to do it without hurting the environment. Because there's a lot of us going out there, and those numbers are ever increasing. And the more people who go, the more damage we do. So we need to know how to do it safely, and how to do it by protecting nature. Above that, we have to know how to organize well, how to organize a trip or an expedition, a day of instruction. We have to know how to teach the various things in blue. We have to know how to teach the activities. We know how to teach safety. We have to know how to teach environmental protection. But at the top of this list is facilitation skills. I've circled it in purple. Facilitation skills are what we're going to be talking mostly about today. Let's start with some definitions. In the 1980s, there was a definition for outdoor education, kind of an umbrella catch-all term that meant anything done in, for, or about the outdoors. That came to us from Phyllis Ford, and in the years that followed, we got to refine that into a form of experiential learning. Takes place outdoors, not exclusively, not entirely, but mostly outdoors. And it involves humans with nature. And we teach about relationships among the people and nature. We'll see a little more about relationships in a minute. This term of experiential learning means not just learning by doing. There must be reflection, integration, and continuation. Otherwise, the learning is based in an experience, but when you add those other three, it becomes experiential. We'll take a look at what those three are again in a moment. And basically, experiential learning says that people learn by direct and purposeful contact with the experiences. These experiences are physically active, they're cognitively meaningful, and they're emotionally engaging. Part of it is also environmental studies. This is the investigation of how humans interact with nature and some of the human-built surroundings of nature. And it involves a kind of an interdisciplinary examination of what would be considered complex or contemporary issues related to those settings, like global warming, for example. Adventure programming is our deliberate and purposeful use of adventure experiences. An adventure experience is something where we don't know what the outcome is going to be. At least for our clients, they're wondering, am I going to get through this? We do that intentionally. We want them to grow, learn, and change around how they relate to themselves and how they relate to others. And so adventure programming as a profession has 4 distinct fields, and it depends on what you're trying to change. If I want to change the way people feel, that's a recreational program. If I want to change the way people think, that's an educational program. If I want to change the way people behave, that is a developmental program. And if I want to change the way people resist being changed, that's therapy. So if I have a group of kids and I take them canoeing or kayaking, take them on a water sport, and we have a lot of fun, the water sport is enough to make them feel good. But if we sit down afterwards and we talk about it, and we talk about what it meant to them and what they might have learned from it, then the recreational program becomes educational. Now, if it's enough to just learn about it, maybe we want them to behave differently. Maybe these kids need to communicate better. Maybe they need to trust one another a little more. And so we move from education to development, and we start addressing behavior. And finally, if the kids are acting out, if their behavior is, shall we say, bad, to give it a value label, and they are unable to change, maybe they're delinquent, they're into crime, they're into drugs, they're into all sorts of things, then we have to do a therapy program. And as you'll see in a few minutes, the thing that makes the difference between all of these different fields is the quality of facilitation. And facilitation I'm defining as anything you do before, during, or after the experience to make the learning or the change easier or faster for the kids. And as you'll see, at a bare minimum, that means asking open-ended questions during a debrief period. But there's so much more to facilitation than just asking questions, as you'll see. So let's look a little at the philosophy and the relationships of what we're talking about. Essentially, we teach the fourth R. Now, I'm a Canadian, but American education is all about the 3 R's. Maybe you've heard this: reading, writing, and arithmetic. The 3 R's. They want to make sure their kids can do those 3 things. But we teach a 4th R. And many, many years ago, I said there was this relationship tree of outdoor education. And it had 2 branches off the main trunk. It had an adventure branch and it had an environmental branch. And the adventure branch of the tree led to interpersonal and intrapersonal relationships. That means how you relate to other people and how you relate to yourself. And the environmental side of it led to echistic relationships and ecosystemic relationships. Ecosystemic relationships are the things in nature, the ecosystems, and how things in nature relate to one another, how energy is transferred around, who eats who, the web of life. Echistic relationships are those relationships between humans and nature. In an echistic relationship, sometimes what a human does to nature comes back to impact the human. So for example, if we dirty the stream with waste from a meal and somebody downstream has to drink that water, we might be poisoning them. So we have to understand that anything we do to the environment is going to do back to us. Now, if we do good outdoor education that is both adventure and environmental at the same time, for example, we use rock climbing to study what grows on a cliff, and we use canoeing to look at what grows in a pond. If we do both of those, we teach all 4 relationships, and the middle relationship of a spiritual nature, a connection, an affinity for land, a healing properties of nature become more evident. So really good education in what we're talking about here does all 5 of these relationships. Now the problem with this is that we are the only profession that I can think of that very deliberately and very purposefully put people in danger. There might be a special kind of surgery that has to put a person into a coma to do it, or things like that. But every day we're putting people in risky situations. Now we obviously need to keep the risks that they perceive to be high while keeping the real risks low or at acceptable levels. And this is a challenge for us, but nevertheless, if we can give them something that seems dangerous but really isn't, then by overcoming their perception of a high risk, they'll get new confidence and therefore improve the way they relate to themselves. It'll improve their self-esteem, their self-worth, their self-concept. At the same time, if we can get them working with others, then they can develop teamwork and improve the way they relate to one another, or interpersonal relationships. Now, that's the adventure side of it. It deals with these kinds of things. There's a list of interpersonal on the right and intrapersonal on the left. Notice that enhanced leadership is in both categories because it's very much a relationship with yourself and a relationship with other people. But that's the adventure side. And for the most part, we'll be talking about the adventure side. But before we do, I want to look at relationships with nature. Since we do these things outdoors, there's also an ecosystemic or an echistic relationship, as I described earlier. If we do all four of these, then we can get at the spiritual relationship. And on the left there is some criteria, prerequisites, if you will, to obtain a spiritual experience. And I should point out that you're going to probably get a copy of these as a PDF. And in the places where it's underlined in blue, that's a hyperlink. And you can click on that. You can go and get more information on that. But that's not the purpose of today's talk. But you can always go and see it another time. Also, this may be religious for some. They may have an Islamic connection to what they're doing. It may make sense to them in their relationship with Allah or others. But it may give them a strong affinity for place. And that strong affinity for place may allow them to take action to protect nature in the future. This piece of nature that they're in, or all parts of nature. And again, there's some connections to how you develop affinity for place there. If we do this properly, then our clients go away from us with a desire to protect and repair the environment. And if they have that, then we should be giving them service learning projects as a part of their programming, where they can do something not just to help humans, but also to help nature. Okay, let's go back to adventure now. I don't want to ignore the environment, but we're going to be focusing mostly on adventure. And the first thing we have to understand if we're going to do adventure is that we're using something called the experiential learning cycle. We're using this to deliver learning and change. It's a cycle that repeats and repeats and repeats. The first step is action. Second step is reflection. The third step is integration. And the fourth step is continuation. And then it repeats 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. As I said before, all learning is based in some kind of experience and action. But when you add reflection, integration, and continuation, it becomes experiential. Reflection will help the person to highlight the lessons that were learned. It'll help them identify new concepts and perhaps clarify old concepts. Once they know that, the next part of it is that they need to transfer that learning to their daily life. And the third step here is highly dependent on something called metaphors. I'd like you to remember that term because we'll come back and look at metaphors in more detail toward the end of this session. But for now, just be aware that that's kind of where the metaphors are going to happen. And finally, in the fourth stage, continuation, they've learned something, they figured out how to apply it to life, but now they need to know, how do I keep this going when I go home? Because when I go home, I'm going to have all sorts of things trying to prevent me, trying to push me back to the same behavior. I'll give you a couple examples. We used to work with corporate people, and when corporate people would go back to work, people would say, hey, don't worry about Simon. I know Simon's trying to do things differently, but it's because he's been on a course. He'll be okay in a few days. Just let him be. Or a person who's overcoming substance abuse or alcoholism who's been through this program, they go home, they're a recovered alcoholic, and the first thing they do is they meet with their friends, and their friends say, let's have a drink and celebrate. So these are the things people have to deal with when they go back to life after our programs. We have to make sure that they're not just learning from these, but the learning is integrated into their life, and that there's a way to sustain it when they go home. So then, If we go back and look at the different kinds of programs, the types and purposes of those programs, we can see this kind of a table developing. Recreation changes feeling, education changes thinking, development changes behaving, redirection or therapy changes resistance. They emphasize different parts of the learning cycle that we just looked at. Recreation is all about action. Education is all about reflection and after action. Development is all about integration after reflection and action. That's where the metaphors happen. And redirection or therapy is all about continuation and support after integration, reflection, and action. Similarly, our facilitation techniques will change. If I'm doing a recreational program for those kids who are having fun, I don't need to have any kind of discussion afterwards. I just say, hey, wasn't that fun? Let's go do the next thing. But if I want to get them thinking differently, I've got to do those fundamentals and funneling. We're going to look at these in detail soon. If I'm moving to change behavior, I need to start using techniques like front loading and freezing. And if I'm doing redirection or therapy, I better be capable at fortifying or using a solution-focused approach. Now, you don't need to know what these things mean right now, but later on, we're going to take a close look at each. The same goes for framing. Framing is the way we introduce the activity. Fantasy introduction. Hang on, I'm getting somebody's asking in the chat, and I lost it here because I'm on full screen. Is anybody able to tell me what's being asked in chat? No? Okay, we'll continue. Yeah.
No questions so far.
Okay, I saw one pop up on my screen, so I wasn't sure. Okay, for framing is the way you introduce the activity that you're doing. So in a recreational situation, you introduce it with fantasy. You talk about volcanic eruptions and poisoned peanut butter and radioactive yogurt and crocodiles and all sorts of things that may not actually be there. In an educational program, you can emphasize reality. This is a piece of rope, this is a paddle, this is a barrel, this is a piece of bamboo, whatever you're making a raft, for example. In a developmental program, I start to use metaphors, and there's two kinds here, contextual and isomorphic. But just know for now that those two are important metaphoric introductions, and we'll examine them in more detail. The rest of this chart looks at the way you prepare for a program, how you diagnose people's needs, how you design and deliver the program, how much time you spend doing activities, and how much time you spend talking about activities, the things you can do on departure of the group and the things you can do on follow-up. And they all change depending on the kind of program that you're doing. So let's take a look, first of all, at this metaphor context. So we're talking about the transfer of learning or change. When something I learn in the adventure shows up in my daily life, learning has transferred. Different kinds of transfer. First kind's specific. If I learn knots because I go rock climbing or on a ropes course, and then I go sailing with my friends and I use the same knots, that's an example of specific transfer. It's very rarely the reason we do what we do, but it might be useful if we go on the ropes course and then we go rock climbing and then we go sailing. But for the most part, we're interested more in what's called non-specific transfer or general learning. This is when the same process of learning is transferring between very different settings. And a perfect example of this would be trust. I learned to trust you in a trust fall or with you belaying me. And when we go back to work or school, I learn to trust you with information and money. So this is an example of transfer. Now, a non-specific, but because the activity they were in and their real life are very different settings, a lot of stuff doesn't transfer very well. There's a loss of learning. However, if we introduce a metaphor, we can improve that. A metaphor is anything that's used in place of something in the adventure. So, for example, we go to climb a mountain and we do it a little piece at a time, maybe 5 or 6 pieces of the mountain before we get to the top. There's areas of rest in between each leg of the climb. If we're climbing on a rope, there's belay stations in between each segments of the climb. And we can say this is a metaphor for how you do difficult tasks at work or at school. And so because we make this climbing situation, climbing a mountain, like real life by using these metaphors, we increase the transfer of learning. And this is called metaphoric transfer. You get parallels between the environment, i.e. the adventure learning and daily living. And now these similar processes, instead of being made between two very different environments, seem the same to the client because we've used metaphor. The key to metaphoric transfer is the strength of the connection. And in a little while, we'll look at some examples of this. But the stronger we can make these parallel connections, the clearer the connection will be and the more likely the client is to take learning home with them. So your job as an outdoor leader is to find metaphors, present metaphors, and use metaphors to strengthen and clarify these connections, thereby helping your clients get their learning and change, take it home and have it last longer. Now, before we look at how you facilitate all of this, I want to look at it from a historical perspective. And 30 years ago, when we first started examining how to facilitate in our research, we found that there were 6 generations. In the 1940s, when Outward Bound started in England, the model was very much let the experience speak for itself. In fact, a young Outward Bound instructor, a friend of mine called Rusty Bailey, a Scotsman, Rusty said, let the mountains speak for themselves. And that's kind of what he was saying here, that you can sort out your own learning, your own personal insights around learning and change, and you can do that for yourselves. And some clients can, but some clients cannot. And they may never get the important lessons. So in the 1950s, you got a very military model. And in some respects, this military model by Outward Bound was spread around the world. I've been to Lumut, and that was definitely a military setup, not nowadays, but when it first started, it had that military flavor to it, as did many Outward Bound schools around the world. And here the idea is that your leader is an expert, and they will tell you what you've learned and tell you what you should do differently next time. So if you go kayaking in the morning, they'll tell you lessons you should have gotten from that, and they'll tell you, now we're going to go rock climbing in the afternoon. I want you to behave this way. But the problems they found with that model was that it was often resisted by the learner. Who are you to tell me what I'm learning? Sure, you're an expert, and I can listen to you so far, but there comes a point at which I feel like I didn't learn that. I learned something else. And that led to conflict with the leader. And when you get that conflict between you and your group, you can no longer help them. If you fall into conflict with your group, You are no use to them as a leader because now they're not going to listen to you. You don't have their respect. They're unlikely to follow you. But in the 1960s, we saw this debriefing coming along. The idea that now, instead of telling you what you learned, we might sit down and ask you what you've learned. The belief being that if we ask you what happened, so what does that mean? Now, what are you going to do about it? Then you might actually own the problem and do something to solve it. And that enhances your reflection, your integration, and your continuation. So this is where we start to ask questions. And the three questions there, what, so what, and now what, are the absolute minimum that I would ever accept in a facilitator. If I get somebody who can ask those three questions, I can teach them more. But if I get somebody working at the 1950s level of speaking on behalf of the experience, it's very difficult to teach them to start asking questions. But let's go on. In the 1970s, there was this direct front load of the experience that came about. People said, hey, if we can do some good asking questions after the experience, and then change comes in the next activity, maybe we can ask questions before this experience, so change comes in this activity. So the difference being that instead of having questions at the end, I have questions in front, and I push the learning in front of the experience instead of discovering it after. So we ask some questions in a kind of pre-brief before the action, and that way it's in their heads when it comes time to do the activity. So a simple front-loading question might be, what are you going to need to succeed here, and how are we going to make sure that happens? And kids are going to say, oh, we're going to need some good communication. We're going to need a leader. How do you make sure you have those? Okay, go ahead. In the 1980s came this idea of introducing the experience or framing it. You start to tell stories with a metaphoric message. Back in the 60s and the 70s, we were asking them for their metaphors, but now we started to get a little more forceful by saying, this is the metaphor. So that if they do the activity in the frame of a metaphor, the very things they succeed with in that introduction, in that activity, are the things they need to succeed in daily life. And so there's a higher degree of transfer. In the 90s, we started to see what we called in those days, indirectly front-loading the experience. This was a group of psychotherapeutic techniques that were, for lack of a better word, strongly manipulative and helpful in overcoming a person's resistance to change. We'll look at this later on. But by 2000, we realized that while we looked at this from a historical perspective, it was of absolutely no use in a leadership preparation curriculum. We needed to divide these techniques into different skill levels, basic, intermediate, advanced facilitation skills, and then organize those under education, development, or therapy. So here they are again. The facilitation techniques get stronger and more involved as you move from education to development to redirection. The way you introduce the activities become more metaphoric. Now, if you're a recreational outdoor leader, you don't need to know any of this. But if you get stuck with a group of troubled kids or adults, and you don't have these skills, you're going to be ineffective and overwhelmed by the group. So it's very important, I feel, that if you are swimming in a deeper end of more difficult clients, that you have these tools in your toolkit. Again, if you're a recreational leader, you're just out having fun, none of this matters. But if you're trying to bring learning and change around the way people think, behave, or resist, you're definitely going to require training, preparation, and ability in these techniques. So let's look at these techniques in more detail. Again, facilitation, anything you do before, during, or after the activity that makes learning or change easier or faster for your client is what facilitation is all about. At the bare minimum, it asks those three questions. What, so what, now what? So the first one is the fundamentals. We'll look at these in more detail in a few minutes. But for now, fundamentals is all about the importance of a circle, the importance of asking questions, the importance of staying neutral as a facilitator. Funneling is moving beyond those three questions I told you about. It's beyond the what, so what, and now what. And instead, it asks a very precise sequence of 6 questions. They're listed there. We'll examine them in a minute. And this filters out extraneous information and lets you concentrate on the change that is needed. Front-loading is asking just 1, maybe 2 questions before the activity. These questions allow the clients to change their behavior in the activity, in the experience. And then this punctuates behavioral change. My favorite front-loading question with youth at risk, kids who are troubled, is to say, okay, we're going to rock climbing today. Before we go rock climbing, I'd like to find out from you what all the ways you think we can sabotage the day is. Let's make a list of things, and kids will say, okay, throwing rocks. Let's put throwing rocks up there. And they make this list. If you ask that question before you go rock climbing, then their behavior during rock climbing changes, and you don't get rock throwing. So by asking a question in advance, you can change behavior during, and it'll give them a chance to compare all the experiences that came before this one with a different way of behaving. And then that's what you can talk about in the discussion. Freezing is where you call a timeout. Again, I'm a Canadian, but I think Canadian football has timeout like American. The group's engaged in something, you ask them to stop. You ask a single question that helps them focus on what they're doing badly. Maybe they're stuck in a rut. Maybe they're not working well as a team together. And you just simply say something like, how's your communication right now? Or how's your teamwork right now? You get some answers and you say, okay, go ahead. And they continue, but now that's fresh in their mind. They're thinking teamwork, they're thinking communication, and somebody is going to behave differently, and you can use that in the discussion that follows to say, what changed at that point? How do we make sure that changes in the future? Fortifying is this stepwise sequence that strengthens their ability to address their resistance to change. And there's different techniques that we'll run through quickly when the time comes, and you can see the breadth and depth of those. And focusing is changing our philosophy as a facilitator. When I started facilitating, I was always thinking, what's wrong with this group? And how do I make what's wrong with this group right? How do I fix them? But there's a different philosophy that says, what's this group doing well? Forget about what they're doing wrong. What are they doing well? And how can I get them to do more of that good stuff? The philosophy behind it is that if you get them doing something that they enjoy and they're good at, it will eventually squeeze out the dysfunction. It'll grow the good behavior and the bad behavior will disappear. Because often if you're working with troubled youth or a therapy group, they're experts at deflecting anything that gets at their problems. And finally, that framing idea. You can introduce it one of 4 ways: fantasy, reality, contextual, isomorphic, and those last 2 are all about metaphors. And we'll look at all of this in detail now. So we'll start with fundamentals. Before you start working with a group, you must know, why am I doing this? And what do they need? It doesn't help to go in with a cold to a group and try to figure out the fact that their communication is poor. You need to suit your facilitation to the purpose and to their needs. So remember, the purposes are change feelings, change thinking, change behavior, change resistance. And again, you need to pull out of your toolkit the techniques that are going to be helpful at getting in that depth. You have to stay neutral. One of the difficulties of working with a group is that they can sometimes upset you. And the way to avoid being upset, the way to have them not push your buttons or pull your trigger, is to know your own values and to know what gets you upset working with a group. Because some groups will be really good at playing you, shall we say, and manipulating you. And in doing so, that will get you off the center, and it will allow them not to have to face their changes. So it helps to know that and to stay neutral, not to take sides, not to think that you have the right answers, but to let them discover what the right answers are for them. There's a code of ethics for facilitators. It's an international code of ethics developed by the Association for Experiential Education. It talks about facilitating at a level you're capable of. It talks about your responsibilities, respecting people, your objectivity, things like that. You want to be asking open-ended questions and avoiding statements. If you avoid statements, you go back to that military model of speaking for the experience. I thought your communication sucked and you guys were really bad at it. Now, if I say that to one of my groups, they're going to be thinking, well, we don't like you and we don't like that in our face, and so we're not going to do a thing about it going forward. But if I ask them, how was your communication? Then the conflict stays inside the group if there's disagreement. Nobody's disagreeing with me because I haven't made a statement. They're disagreeing with one another, and that's where I want to keep the conflict. I don't want it spilling over to me. Gestalt therapy gives us those questions. What? So what? Now what? So again, at a minimum, I want people working for me to say, what happened? So what did you learn from it? Now, what are you going to do about it? That's the minimum. When we do these activities with groups, they want to talk about the outcomes, why they didn't get to the mountain, why they fell out of the canoe in the whitewater. But we need them to help keep them focused on the processes, not the products, not the outcomes, but the processes going on within the group. We want to present single speaking. People have the right to pass. What we talk about is confidential within the group, but people take turns speaking. And we want to do all of this in a circle because circles are warm and inviting. We can see one another, we can hear one another, and you are able to observe body language and see who's comfortable and not comfortable with what's being discussed. You want to make sure that you do these things, that you have enough time to facilitate, that you balance the talking with the doing, that you talk about things that were recent, that you talk about things that are close to you. So if you go on the ropes course, debrief at the ropes course where people can see things. Don't go somewhere else where they can't see it. I went to Brunei Outward Bound recently, and I was very impressed with the fact that by their climbing walls and their ropes course and places like that, they have these little shacks, if you will, with a whiteboard, and they can be out of the sun, they can be out of the rain, but they can be right there debriefing, discussing, right beside what they just finished doing. That's the way to go. And lastly, here are some don'ts to consider in your fundamentals. Ask a question, but don't answer for them. Wait until they answer. Don't worry that answers are correct or not. Don't compare this group to other groups. Don't judge people. Don't give them false feedback like you are the best group I've ever had. Don't say the last group did it 10 minutes faster than you. Don't do things like that. Don't assume that you know best. One of the things about groups is the stuff will be going on in that group that you have no idea about. And it takes a long time for you to figure things out, so you might as well get them to bring it out by asking questions. And if you're going to ask questions, start off with a lot of positive ones. Let's discuss the things they did well until they're comfortable talking, and then slowly work in the things where they need to improve. Now we're going to look at the other basic skill, which is funneling. A funnel takes this broad learning experience that we've been engaged in, whether it's the ropes course, rock climbing, sailing, whatever. It's the day on expedition. It's the game they've played. And we pour it into this funnel and we put it through 6 filters. The reason we need to filter it out is because every activity has 1,000,001 things that we could talk about, but we need to filter out all the things we don't yet want to talk about. And we want to distill this down to pure change. So think about a funnel from chemistry class in high school or coffee making, if you will, if you make coffee, with a filter in there that keeps the grounds in the coffee filter and lets the pure coffee flow through. When you do that with these questions, then what comes out the bottom is pure gold for helping a group change. In the next slide, we'll look at these 6 questions. But for now, let's talk about what you have to do before you use a funnel, before you do these 6 questions. You have to understand what the client's needs are. If the client has a need to improve their cooperation or their leadership, you must know that in order to form 6 questions around that topic. If you don't know what's going on with the group, you can go in the wrong direction no matter how well you mean. If you don't have this information, then you're going to have to do some get to know them activities where you can start to see what's going on. And you can keep notes on those things, and you can be aware of what they say, how they behave, how they interact with one another, and anything that happens during the experience that is a critical incident. What do I mean by critical incident? Well, it could be as obvious as somebody smacking somebody else, or it could be a little more subtle, somebody saying something rude to somebody else, or it could be everybody talking at once and nobody listening to anyone else. These are all things you see in the group that it's worth talking about afterwards. Sometimes you're going to get a group that there's 101 things you could talk about out of this 1,000,000 of things that happened. Don't worry, because if you don't address the problem in this activity, it will be coming back in the next activity. So if you miss something, you're going to get another chance to go at it. But if you know ahead of time the reason for doing things, because you've had a good needs assessment with the group, somebody knows why the group is there, that'll help you make the decision about what to talk about, what topic to do in the end. So here are some of those questions. The first kind of question is a replay question, and you can see examples there. You want this to bring up the topic that you want to discuss. So if I want to talk about communication, I might say, why are you guys here? Oh, we're here to work on our teamwork. Okay, so what are some of the things about teamwork that you need to succeed in this activity? And they'll say, we need trust, we need cooperation, we need leadership, we need communication, we need, communication. That's an interesting topic. Can we talk further about that? And if they say yes, I can go to number 2. Can you give me an example of where your communication was good or bad, excellent or poor, in that last activity? Now remember, I'm starting off with positives. I go to negatives later. So let's say I'm at the point where we can talk about negatives. I've seen in that activity that everybody was talking at once and nobody was listening to anyone else. And rather than tell them that, this is where I want them to bring it up. So if they bring that up and they say, well, there was a time when nobody was listening to me, say some more about that. Tell me about that. What was that like? And when everybody remembers that, then you can ask the third question. How did everybody talking and nobody listening make you feel? How did it impact the group morale? How did it influence the task? And people will say, it made me feel lousy, made me feel invisible. It was the reason we failed. It sapped the energy out of our group. Once you get them agreeing to that, you can ask the fourth question. Okay, and sometimes it's helpful to review so everyone understands where you are. Okay, we're talking about communication. You told me about this time when everybody was talking at once and nobody seemed to be listening to you. And you've told me that it basically frustrated you. It was the reason you failed and it sapped the energy out of the group. So now I'm interested in knowing, what did you learn from that? Can you give me a lesson that came out of this? And here's where we want them to say, okay, I think we would benefit from having somebody control the communication, maybe a moderator. And when you get some good suggestions from the group, you want to ask them to tell you more about that so that good suggestions are emphasized. And when everybody understands what everybody learned from that, you can go to number 5. And you can say, how was this activity like your life? And I can remember a very powerful day when I was doing this very activity with this very funnel, and I was talking to school teachers, and they said, this is exactly like our staff meetings. So this was how they had their staff meetings. Everybody talked and nobody listened. And you say, okay, so now I'm interested in number 6, running out of fingers. Now I'm interested in knowing this idea that you have for a moderator. Would that be useful in your work as school teachers? Or, and that's the question I would ask if they were close to leaving. If they were still here for several more days, I'd be asking questions like, what can we do about getting a moderator in the next activity? Okay. And you get them to make a commitment. And then you do the next activity, and one of 2 things happens. Either they don't get a moderator, in which case you can discuss that, or they do get a moderator. And now you can compare the second activity to the first. And you can run a funnel on what was your communication like in this activity? What did you learn about getting a moderator? What do you think a moderator would be useful at school? And you can run through a funnel again, but now a positive funnel, comparing the positive behaviors they've exhibited in the second activity with the negative behaviors they exhibited in the first activity. And all that really is it's the funnel, it's the what, so what, now what, expanded into a more precise and detailed sequence of questions that if you and other facilitators know, you can work together and help one another through this process. So now we're going to look at these intermediate skills. Freezing. This is something you do during the activity. When folks are stuck in a rut, they can't get themselves out of it, you call a timeout. You freeze their action, and you ask a single provocative question. By provocative, I mean something that really gets them thinking, and something that they go, oh wow, good point, hadn't thought of that. And then once you've asked it, move on. Sometimes you don't even need to get an answer. You just need to say, when they're all yelling at one another, you just need to call a timeout and say, I got one question for you. How's your communication right now? Or is the moderator working for you? Go ahead. You don't even need to get an answer from them. You just need to change the way they think. The reason we're changing the way they think is because we want the behavior to change in the experience, in the activity. Front loading happens before. And it's essentially the funnel turned upside down. We're going to look at these questions in a minute, but instead of asking all of the questions, you're going to ask one or two. Because change usually comes after the debrief, we want to ask these questions ahead of time so that change happens in the adventure. We don't want to do front loading more than 10% of the time, because if we front load all the time, then we're preparing the group for its problems and it becomes dependent on us. So it's a technique of last resort. So if I have a group that all day long they've been saying that they're going to get a moderator, and every time I explain the next activity, they rush in without getting a moderator. And afterwards, they apologize and they say, we will get a moderator next time, but they don't. So now it's time, this has been going on all day, now it's time for me to say, this is the wall or the spider's web or whatever. Here are the rules, here are the safety concerns, go ahead. Oh, one more thing. What was it you were going to do differently in this activity? I forgot. And that's when somebody says, oh yeah, moderator. Moderator, okay, thank you, go ahead. Now, they pretty much get a moderator because it's fresh in their minds. And that's what you're doing with these questions. You're asking one or two to put thoughts in their minds before the activity. You can use it as a power trip, but I would ask that you do it ethically with their best interests in mind. And here are those kinds of questions. There's the revisit question. You made a promise in the last activity. Let's go through what everybody promised before we start this activity. Motivation. Why in the world are we even doing this? Objectives. What do you think your group's going to get out of this? Function. What do you need to do to succeed? How do we make sure that happens? Dysfunction. What are the things that you've done in the past that are going to get in the way here? How do we make sure those don't happen? And prediction. We're about to do this thing. What do you think is going to happen? And the reason this is called front loading is because you see that diagram of what Americans call a front loader. You may have a different term for it, I'm sure you do, in Malay. But it pushes with this big shovel all the learning in front of the activity. So when you do the debrief afterwards, you just have to do a little touch-up work with the backhoe. You don't have to do a lot of discussion if you throw front loading in front. Now we come to advanced skills. These are the ones you're going to need for therapy or redirectional programs. It's a stepwise sequence of 6 techniques. And because it's stepwise, you try the least intrusive or the least offensive method first. And if it fails, you go to the next. So the first thing you assume is that the client, the individual, is just unaware of the change. And rather than you explain it to them, the reason you don't do it is because you don't want to get in conflict with your group. Instead of you explaining it to them, you have someone they admire explain it to them. So perhaps some of you don't understand what's going on here. Who in the group can clarify that and explain what's happening? Great. And sometimes once they understand what's happening, it's enough that they can change. And that's great. You're finished. but let's say they're still having a problem. So the next thing you think is, okay, it's not that they don't know what's going on. It's that they do know, it's just that they won't go. They're unwilling. So now I'm going to negotiate with the person. And I'm going to say, Simon, I see you're having difficulty with the change. What can I do to help you make this transition? Do you need more time? Do you need more resources? Is there something someone in the group can do to help you through this? And sometimes that changes their willingness, and great, you're finished. But sometimes it doesn't. And it turns out you got to go to the third step, which is they disagree with what's going on. And if they disagree with what's going on, your facilitation technique is to be incredibly confused and say, Simon, I've never quite seen this before. I know you understand the change, but you don't seem to be making it. And I've never, ever had that happen. Please help me understand what is going on. And no matter what Simon says to me, I continue to be confused. Because it's not important that I understand. What's important is that Simon, in an effort to help me understand, must examine his behavior from a lot of different directions to help me understand. Now, sometimes looking at what he's doing goes, yeah, maybe that's no big deal. Okay, and change happens. And then we're finished. But sometimes he doesn't understand that he's unconsciously opposing me in step 4. So I have to use what's called paradox. Simon, sometimes you're used to me cheering you on, and sometimes you're used to me pushing you and encouraging you to get through something. But today I'm going to behave very differently. I'm going to encourage you to quit. I'm going to encourage you to give up. I'm going to encourage you not to change. And it's a kind of a reverse psychology that will help Simon make the change. And if he does, great, we're finished. But if he doesn't, we go to 5. And now I got to think that Simon is consciously opposing what's going on. He's in denial about the change. So I have to give him 2 choices. And I have to make sure ethically that the choices are win-win. Sometimes when we're working with troubled youth, we might give them 2 choices, but they're lose-lose. I myself, when I was younger, would work with these kids and I would say, listen, you little brat, you either do this or you do this. And I give them 2 choices. I would say, you either do as I say or we're going to kick you out of the program. Now, I used to do that a lot. But those are lose-lose situations because if they do what I say, they give into adult power, they lose their voice, they lose their autonomy, they become in conflict with me, and that's no good. And if they don't do what I say, then I kick them out of the program and they don't benefit, they don't change, they go back to jail or wherever it might be. And that's not good. So I have to give them a choice where they're empowered. I have to say, let me tell you a story, Simon, about 2 different people who were on this course before. One did this, and I described the story of what I want him to do. And another did this, and these were the consequences he experienced. And I described the other side of it. Now, it's a win-win because one of 2 things is going to happen. Either Simon's going to do the right thing of his own choice, which is great, or he's going to not do what I described, and that's going to be okay because then we can talk about it. There's no threat of throwing him out. It's just either you're going to do this or you're not. It's your choice. And these are the things that happen around those. But there comes a time, if that works, great, you're finished. But there comes a time when none of those things work and you come to the final step and you just figure Simon's apathetic. He doesn't care. He's indifferent. This is never going to happen. And finally, as a last resort, we have to find some other program for Simon because he's not going to work in this one. So that's fortifying. That's that 1990s stuff that we talked about. We want to do this 1% of the time because they're really going to be conflicting they're manipulative. So if we start to use these a lot, they can really create conflict with our group. So they're last resorts for people. If we use them too frequently, we set up a conflict that prevents us from helping them. And lastly, like the other ones, we want to do it with their best interests in mind, not as a power or control trip. That's lose-lose. Focusing is the last advanced skill, again, for this very difficult, dysfunctional group of clients. It refers to where I'm going to put my attention as a facilitator. I can focus on the problem, or I can focus on the solution. And you can see in this table the differences. Problem looks at what's going wrong with the group. We talk about things they don't want to have happen. We talk about what they've got to do better. We talk about their weaknesses. We talk about why the problem is caused, what causes it, and what sustains it. But in a solution focus, we look at what enhances the solution. We look at what they're doing well, what they're doing correctly. We emphasize what is wanted and what they're already doing. And we accentuate their strengths. And we're not interested in the problem, we're interested in when the problem doesn't happen. And a great example of this is when I've worked with couples that fight. I ask them, tell me about a time when you're not fighting. What are you doing when you're not fighting? They say, well, we usually don't fight when we watch TV. Well, watch more TV and you'll fight less. And by fighting less, they get a bit of a breathing opportunity. They get a chance to not, to see things differently for a moment. And sometimes doing more of that will squeeze out the bad stuff. So let me give you examples now of how you're going to change your questions, how you're going to reword them from a problem focus to a solution focus. And remember, I was very problem focused early on, and I've moved to being solution focused now with some of my work. And many of my colleagues who are psychotherapists have gone entirely solution focused. So afterwards, after you're doing an activity, you might ask a funneling question. On a scale of 0 to 10, how is your communication? Now, if I have a problem focus, I want to know, let's say the group answers 5. I want to know, how do we increase it from 5 to 7? That's how I would have done it. In a solution focus, I would say, what are you already doing that if you didn't do it, you'd be a 3? Let's do more of that. So hopefully you see the difference. One is asking them to increase it by seeing what's missing, kind of the half empty glass, while as the other is asking them, what have you got going for you that you can use to get it higher? Because if you didn't do that, you'd go lower. That's the glass half full approach. During a timeout, a problem-focused question is, what's not working for you with a moderator? But a solution-focused question would be, what's going really well right now with the moderator and how can you do more of it? And finally, in the front-loading questions, before we start this activity, I just want to know, problem-focused, what are all the things we could do that would lead to failure? How do we make sure that doesn't happen? But a solution-focused, what are the things that would lead to success and how do we make sure those do happen? Subtle differences. And in the research that we've done, we realize that they work equally well with functional groups, but if you have a dysfunctional group, the problem focused is ineffective. The solution focus makes the difference. And we believe that's because dysfunctional clients are going to be really good at blocking change. And because of that resistance, they're going to shy away from fixing the missing parts, but they're not going to shy away from improving the existing parts. Getting close to finishing now. I want to make sure everybody knows the spider's web, this activity where you pass people through their own opening, so you can't use the same opening twice. There are strings around with a little bell at the middle, and if you contact the strings, the bell rings and you have to start over. The reason I'm using this is because it's going to explain different ways of introducing that activity. Remember, if I'm doing recreation to change the way people feel, then I'm going to want to use a fantasy introduction. Education, I'm changing the way they think and feel. I'm going to use a reality introduction. Development, I'm going to change the way they behave. I'm going to use a contextual introduction, a contextual metaphor. And if it's therapy, changing the way they resist change, behave, think, and feel, it's going to be an isomorphic metaphor. Now let's look at what those look like. Fantasy. This is a giant spider's web. If you touch the web, the spider bites you and you start over. Now that's fun. That's recreation. That's fantasy. Reality. This is a series of strings strung across an opening, and you got to go through your own opening, but if you touch the strings, the bell rings and you got to start over. Now here's where it gets interesting. We start to give a metaphoric description that would work with any client in a common category with similar issues. So if I'm working with high school kids, it's not a spider's web. It is the challenges they face between where they are now in school and graduation on the other side. And the challenges they face in the middle are things like drugs and so on, you know, the kinds of problems kids are going to have. And if I don't know enough about kids, I'm going to ask them, what are some of the problems you face in life trying to get from here to graduate from high school? And we're going to call those things the different strings. We're going to let them label those things. And that story is a metaphor. It's a metaphor for their journey through high school. And we can embellish that and we can make it more. What happens if this happens and you fail and you have to start over? You have to repeat a grade, or you have to take a course over. So we give it to them in such a way that when we come time to discuss it, we don't talk about the activity, we talk about the journey through high school. And that description, that discussion, makes it so much more of a rich learning experience, and more stuff is likely to go home with them because we haven't been playing a game, we've been doing a simulation of life. Now that's general, it works for everybody who's in a high school situation. Isomorphic is kind of like that, but you introduce and make sure that every item in the story has a purpose that fits it to the same structure in life. And that fit includes the way they solve the problem, the resolution to the activity. It must mirror what they need to be doing in daily life. So, as an example, I had a group, a corporate group, who worked in a warehouse, and their job was to ship things from the warehouse, and they were sending things from the warehouse. They were showing up at the stores damaged. And in addition to this, there was a lot of blame being thrown around and a lot of people saying, it's not my fault, I have nothing to do with it. Or even worse, we didn't do that. That must be the shipping company, it's not us. Now, they wouldn't accept that. So I came up to the spider's web with them, and I never mentioned the spider or the web. I said, welcome to Distribution Network. In this distribution network, you will be passing products, and I pointed at the people, from the warehouse, pointed to this side, to my stores on the other side. Doesn't do any good to send all of the products through the same pathway on the network to supply just one of my stores. I need products to go through their own unique pathways to reach my stores. Along the way, if there's contact with the distribution network, we're going to say that those products are damaged and you're going to have to take them back voluntarily before you can send them again. If you deliver damaged goods to one of my stores, I will send every shipment back and we will renegotiate our contract. Now, this is the exact story of these people. It doesn't work for anyone else. It's their metaphor and their metaphor alone. And the way they fix the game, the way they fix the problem, the way they solve it, is exactly what they need to be doing in life, on the job, back at the warehouse. So because of that, we get to have a very powerful discussion at the end that is about life. It has nothing to do with the game. It's about life. So these are the ways you ramp up your introductions to be more and more sophisticated when you're dealing with more difficult clients. We want to strengthen these metaphors because it has a powerful impact on learning. In funneling, we ask them a question, how is this like life? We want them to tell us the metaphor. In front loading, we say, what's the moral of this story for this activity? We want them to imagine the metaphor in advance. And with isomorphic framing, we tell them what the metaphor is. We allow them to operate as they normally do in life within that framework we create for them. And we do that with the intent that the behaviors they show us in the activity will be the very things they do in life, and hopefully there'll be an improved one in there which will show them something they can transfer back to the workplace. I ruin all of this if I say in any of these, except the first one, and the spider bites you and you have to start over, because that shatters the metaphors that we're creating. So you got to stay in the framework for the whole activity. In conclusion, I want you to look at these again. We're looking at recreation, changing feelings, education, changing thinking, development, changing behavior, and therapy or redirection, changing resistance. We're focusing on different parts of the learning cycle, metaphors being critical in development. And if I'm doing a recreational program, I never need to worry about any of this. But if I'm changing thinking, I better be doing the first two basics. And if I'm doing development, I better be doing the middle two intermediates, plus the basics. And if I'm doing redirection or therapy, I better be doing all of these things. I can be changing my framing in the way I introduce the activities to suit the kind of program I'm trying to run. And finally, if this is the experience timeline, here's where it all fits. I've got before, during, and after the adventure. I want to frame or introduce it before. I want to do the activity or adventure during, and I want to debrief or discuss afterwards. That's where I do front loading at the front, at the beginning, the before phase. That's where I'm going to use freezing in the during phase. And that's where I'm going to apply my fundamentals and my funneling. I'm going to change all of these questions to be solution focused if I'm working on the right side of that table above. And finally, at the during and after period is where I apply my fortifying, those powerful psychotherapeutic techniques of paradox, double bind, confusion, and so forth. That brings us to questions. I hope you're still there.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Professor Dr. Sam. Please, great presentation and sharing. So on behalf of all the online participants, would like to express our utmost gratitude for your views and expert lectures on this topic. So now let's open the floor to all the online participants to ask their question and maybe even share their views with us. So to everyone who is listening on the other side, you may unmute your mic and ask your question or write it down in the chat box. To our FB Live viewers out there, you may write your question on the comment section, either in Malay or English, and we will try to answer as much as possible. So please ask away. Technical team, could you please put all the attendees in the ring? And probably they can speak directly to Professor Dr. Simon, please. Okay, so Prof, to spice up the session, let me start with some of these questions. We pick up the question from Facebook Live. So the question is to change a behavior, especially towards one commitment to a career, such as being burnt out, tired of doing daily work. What are your views or suggestions related to outdoor facilitation training?
So to change behavior, I think it's important to emphasize some front loading 10% of the time and some freezing action only if the group is getting into trouble. If you can change behavior just by debriefing, you don't need any of that. But it's common for people to have trouble with the behavior, so you need to somehow remind them with a little bit of front loading and an occasional freezing. Is that answering the question? Did I understand it correctly?
Thank you, Prof. So another question is that how can one be a good or be an excellent facilitator?
So to be a good facilitator, I think there's value in learning each of these techniques that I've described, the fundamentals and the funneling as a start, to practice those, get experience doing those, do them with people who know how to do them. And then when comfortable with those, try freezing and front loading.
Could you please mute your mic so that we can have a good session with Professor Dr. Simon, please? Technical team, could you please mute those who... Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Right.
Somebody's having a good time, and that's important.
Yeah.
So I see a question up here about special needs children. Do you want me to address that?
Sorry, Dr. Simon, please.
That's okay. I see a question about special needs children in the chat.
Yeah. Okay, so you can answer directly.
Right. So when you're working with special needs children, the ability to express themselves with language is sometimes difficult. And so this kind of a Western approach of asking questions and giving answers and then throwing ideas around may be ineffective. So you move to nonverbal ways of communicating. Maybe there's some artwork they can do, cutting out pictures, making a collage. Maybe they can model things with clay. And they can use this as a way to express feelings that doesn't have to be verbal. Especially useful with very young children who may not have the vocabulary to talk about their feelings, but they can use play therapy, act it out. Older kids can use photography or poetry if they're able to do that. There's a lot of these nonverbal techniques that you can substitute, and sometimes they'll lead you into a little discussion, but not necessarily. It can be done non-verbally.
Thank you, Prof. So we just put all attendees in the ring. So could you please switch on their camera, their video? Technical team. Oh yeah. All right. So yeah, all attendees, could you please switch on your camera so that we can speak directly? You can ask Professor Dr. Simon Priest directly if there is anything that you wanted to know, you wanted to ask. So you may chat. You may chat in the chat box, or you can ask Prof directly. Okay, so while we are waiting for the question, so Prof, this is one question from Jane, Management and Science University, oh, my friend. Okay, so how can we make leadership in adventure program more attractive to current teenagers or college students? So again, Prof, yeah, I repeat the question. So how can we make leadership in adventure program more attractive to current teenagers or college students?
So you're saying, how can you recruit more people to get into leadership preparation to work in these groups?
Yeah.
I think what you do is what we see happening in other countries in the world. You go to social work, for example, people who are committed to working with children. And you can't just tell them about this stuff. You've got to give them a free experience. So social workers and school teachers, either in training or already in the professional role, you want to get them on an experience for a day, for as long as they can afford, and show them the power of this. Once they see how this helps change them, they will know that this is what they want to do with the kids, and they will come on board. And the ones that don't are the ones that probably are not going to make good outdoor leaders to begin with. So you want to focus on people who have the passion for looking after children, looking after adults, people who are ready to do that in a conventional way. Give them the experience, and that will convert them.
Okay, thank you, Prof. So Jane, if you are in this group, could you please respond to the answer, either meet your question or not? Okay, so Prof, we had one more question from Siti Nur Haijah binti Jusman. So can autism students develop their communication and social skill with the outdoors activities? If yes, what type of program is that? Recreation, education development, or redirection? Thank you.
So the programs I've seen be effective with autistic children or children on a Asperger's spectrum of choices has essentially started with recreation, and over time has, for those students that have the communicative ability, has moved further up to change thinking and behavior. So with an autistic client group, it's going to be a slow process making that transition, but you start with recreation.
Thank you, Prof. One more question. Yeah, anyone who wanted to speak directly to, yeah, Izzat Fadli.
Hello, Prof. I'm Izzat. Do you know about the forest school? There are some school that for early childhood that do in forest. They have some experience in forest. They go to the forest and go to learn. Do that program is good. Thank you.
Okay, yes, I've not experienced that in Malaysia, but in South Africa, where I spent some time teaching, they had a forest school system. It was very environmentally focused. But over time, these forest schools started to add adventure to what they did. And when they started doing that, they started impacting more of children's behaviors. A very common thing in America is the summer camp. Lots of people go to summer camp. It's very recreational. But then summer camps want to operate all year round. They start to do educational and developmental work with school children. So I suspect I don't know about Malaysia because I haven't seen them. But in the ones I have seen in different places in the world, that's the general approach they've taken. And in America, it's more about camping than it is forest schools. Does that help? Okay, great. Thank you, Izzat.
Thank you, Izzat, for the question. Okay, we still open the floor to those who wanted to ask or speak directly. So we have a question in the chat board. Hi, doctor. I would like to ask, can we integrate our education with blended learning as well as STEM learning, as today our education in school context are based on this model? Prof?
Yes, again, I haven't seen how STEM operates in your country, but looking at STEM in Canada and STEM in America, and in some European countries where I've seen this, it is very much focused on lessons learned through outdoor education. A really good example of this is how do you use triangulation to measure the width of a river. So how do you set up triangles and measure the smaller one to get the larger dimensions, to get the width of a river? That's teaching mathematics in an outdoor setting. And there's lots of obvious biology, zoology, botany, geology, things like that that can be taught in the out of doors. But they tend more to focus on STEM in environmental studies than they do adventure programming. My argument is they should be doing all of this. If they're going to do STEM environmentally, there should be some adventure elements in there so we get at all of the relationships.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Mr. Simon. My name is
Hi.
Faisal.
Hi, Faisal.
I have a question for you, though. It's about conditioning the participants or student of activities. Other than Maslow hierarchy of needs, do you have any other methods or module or principle or context that you use in order to conditional the participants while we do the activities then?
Other than Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think it's important to look at things like flow theory. Are you familiar with Csikszentmihalyi flow theory?
Yeah.
So I think there's value in flow theory. There's some research and work that I did off of this that looks at competence effectiveness. How you, I wish I had a diagram I could show you, but the idea that as a facilitator, you help people determine the locus of control. Is this an intrinsic or extrinsic reaction to what they have? So a child who is timid and fearful will say that they only succeeded at rock climbing because you gave them some help. You gave them special shoes. They will make it an extrinsic allocation of their success. Your job as a facilitator is to shift it from extrinsic to intrinsic and say, It wasn't the equipment that helped you get up there. It was your determination. You talk to them about that so that kids who don't have strong self-esteem come to realize that they did it. It wasn't because you were talking them through it. It was because of, or some external reason. It was for internal reasons. And by helping them understand the internal reasons for success, their self-worth, self-esteem, self-concepts are all improved. So I think there's a lot of value in social learning theory by Bandura. Are you familiar with Bandura? Okay, I would look up social learning theory from Bandura, and basically it's self-efficacy, the idea to which I believe I can achieve something. Bandura's early research is done with fear of snakes, but it applies well to whether or not we are afraid, not just of snakes, whether we're afraid of rock climbing, and what we do to overcome that. And then your job is to help them understand that it came from within them, not some outside source.
Okay, Faisal?
Is that good, Faisal? You seem to have disappeared. We lost them.
Okay, thank you, Prof. So one more question. I just
Sure.
pick up from the chat box.
Thank
Can
you, thank
adventure programming solve dishonest or fraudulent conduct by those in power, typically involving bribery, corruption?
Wow, that's a difficult question. Well, I can tell you that I did some work with the Australian Customs Service when I was doing visiting professor work in Australia. And there was a lot of that going on, and we talked about it. Now, it's very difficult for someone to say, yeah, I'm a bad guy. But we could talk about what the impacts of that are. And I was told it made some difference, that the amount of corruption decreased. But I have no hard and fast research data to substantiate that. I just have the anecdotal data of what I was told. But yes, I think you can, if you get the people together who are involved in this and you spend some time talking about it and achieving things together as a group.
Okay, Prof. So thank you. Next question is that from Elena Marie. In what way outdoor learning can improve intrapersonal and interpersonal relationship? Can you suggest an activity and explain how it can develop?
Certainly. Let's take the intrapersonal first, because I think that's the easiest one to see. A very common thing is children with low self-esteem. These children have been told repeatedly that they're no good, that they're stupid, that they shouldn't try because they're going to fail. And all you need to do with those kids is show them an instance of where they can succeed, where they're not stupid, where they're not put down. And then in discussion with them, you can talk to them about how they achieved something. And by them understanding that it was they that achieved it, not somebody else, they will feel stronger about what they do. And that can be anything from academic performance to the ropes course, the challenge course. It can be any number of different things. But your job as a facilitator, again, is to make them see that this came from within them, that they are valued in that way. And that will build their self-concept, their self-esteem, their worth. And then as they get better at this, you keep giving them more and more difficult challenges, knowing that the ones you give them, they will overcome. And each time they overcome, you talk about how this relates to the things that people have said about them, and they start to understand that the truth is they are worthwhile. That's an example of intrapersonal. Interpersonal would be when you're getting a bunch of people together and building them as a team. You run them through a series of team challenges things they have to work together cooperatively to trust one another, a foundation of trust and communication. They have to share their leadership. And as you do that, you make them stronger as a team. You improve the way they interact with one another. And then you send them home saying, work on a project at home as a team. If it's a work group, give them a work project. If it's a school group, give them a school project, so that they carry the teamwork home and they continue to apply what they've learned on your program. And those are the two sides of the relationship. You just approach them slightly differently, but most of the time you're weaving them together in the same program, because you're dealing with individuals and you're dealing with groups.
Thank you, Prof. So one more question. We have two more questions wrote in the chat box. The question is, how do we deal students who are unable to do high physical activity? For example, obesity. And at the same time, we don't want to neglect them to be involved in the high activities, high element activities. For example, hiking with the other student in the group that day.
Right. So one of the things, if you're dealing with that, you have to be careful that kids that are physically disadvantaged, i.e. the obese individual, is not put in a position where they can be bullied or ridiculed by the other kids. That's just destructive to their worth. So rather than do physically demanding activities, you start doing activities that still require these relationships and to work together as a group and to take on challenges as individuals, but you choose activities that are not physical. You can do this with a board game. If you're skilled enough as a facilitator, you can sit down and play snakes and ladders and draw the learning out of that. Now, I'm not suggesting it has to be that passive, but an activity, an active thing like playing games, the ropes course, things like that will make a big difference for these kids if they don't think they're going to get through it. I remember doing an activity where we had a platform and a hole in the platform, and the whole group had to climb up onto the platform through the hole. And often in dealing with people who had eating disorders, they said, there is no way I'm going to fit through that hole, because their body image was exaggerated. And yet when they fit through it, it caused them to redefine their body image and to come away understanding themselves differently. So you can do a lot of good with a bunch of games and activities, the Carl Ronke kinds of things. It doesn't have to be an outdoor pursuit like mountain climbing or rafting, for example.
Okay, thank you, Prof. So next question. We have two more questions. So when we should use kind of typical technique, basic, intermediate, and advanced, can it use in a single program?
Yes, but remember, if you're doing just an educational or a developmental program, you're not going to need to use all of these skills. You're only going to go as far as freezing or front loading. You're not going to need fortifying or solution focus, because you're not dealing with a group of youth at risk or criminals or substance abusers. If you're just doing it with school kids, maybe behavior isn't the issue, maybe it's thinking, academic performance. Then you're just going to need to have a discussion afterwards and ask questions. That's all you've got to do to make it valuable for them. So what I'm saying with basic, intermediate, and advanced is, if you are asked to facilitate a group of very difficult, troubled children, and you only have basic skills, you should not do that, because you are going to get overwhelmed by those kids. They're going to manipulate you. But if you have the advanced skills, then you can work with those kids. And you can do a lot more good for them than if you had just some basic skills. Is that clear for the person who asked?
Thank
I see
you, Prof.
I also see a question about a link about the fear of snakes.
Yeah, Faisal.
Is that for Faisal? Faisal,
Yeah.
you can hear me. You want to Google Albert Bandura and self-efficacy,
Yes, sir. Yes.
and you will come across plenty of those sorts of things.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Faisal. All right, Prof. So since we are in the pandemic COVID era, so I will pick up this one last question, which is the question is: Hi, Simon. Please share COVID-19 pandemic's impact on the recreational behavior of outdoor enthusiasts across urban and rural communities in your place.
Yes. Well, what we're seeing in Canada and America is that more people are going outdoors than ever before to because they can't go to a gym to exercise. So in the neighborhood, I live at the end of a dead end street that goes into the forest, and I see a lot more people walking past my house to go into the forest on the trails. There's been some research done. It'll be available on the AEE's website. That's A for Albert, E for experiential, E for education, the Association for Experiential Education.org. And they've got a whole bunch of stuff on there, research and protocol changes for dealing with COVID-19 and what we do. Maybe I can put that on the chat board.
Okay, we have one more from Jeffrey Zakaria before we end the session. So Dr. Simon, do you agree risk is one of the factor influence among parents nowadays? Based on that, they sometimes not allow their kids joining the outdoor activities, especially during pandemic COVID-19.
Risk is one factor influence among parents nowadays. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on in Malaysia, but Mike Gass, the guy who I've written a lot of things with, who I think is an absolute brilliant professor, has said that there are 4 pillars for parents. Is this safe? Does it work? Is it worth the money I'm going to spend on it? And how do I know it's a good program? And those are the 4 things parents want to know. Is it safe? Does it work? Is it worth the money I'm going to spend on it? And how do I know it's a good program? So I think if you're trying to allay parents' fears, if you're trying to reduce their fears, you have got to produce information that you can give them that answers those 4 questions. And so what we see in North America is programs know their accident rates, and they compare them to things like driving a car and playing high school football. And when you make those comparisons, what we do is so much safer than both of those things. When you look at does it work, there's a lot of research out there saying that it changes, that what we do changes behavior. But whether or not the program actually does that is another question. And believe me, there are programs who say, we're doing this, but what they're really doing is recreation. They're not doing developmental or therapy. They're not even facilitating them. But they say they're just as effective. So I think you have to point out and educate parents that there are these different fields, and you're going to pay more for better facilitation. You're going to pay more for a more involved program, but it's actually going to make a difference in the kid's life. Whereas a recreational program is going to make them feel good, but 6 months later, they're going to be back exactly where they were, not feeling good.
Okay, thank you, Prof. One last question. It's not a question, but then she or he asked about from Bandung, Indonesia. About can we have a slide presentation So don't worry about that. So we will upload the slide presentation in our Aurora page. So you may download from there. So thank you very much, all attendees, our friend from Indonesia, from Malaysia, from Singapore, Southeast Asia. So we have come to the end of today's talk. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our distinguished panelists, Professor Dr. Simon Praise, for the invaluable sharing of knowledge and expertise.
Thank you.
So can we, all of us, open up your mind and we give a big clap to our panel.
Thanks.
I will also
thank you so much.
Thanks, Prof.
I would also like to thank all the online attendees who took interest and spent their precious time to attend our Aurora talk series for 5.0. Thank you very much. Stay home, stay safe, stay healthy. Assalamualaikum, and have a pleasant afternoon, everyone. But then before we end this session, could we please take a photo? So please, all attendees, all friends, could you please open up your video and we take a photo.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, page 2. Loading. 1, 2, 3. Okay, page 3. Akhir Aris. 1, 2, 3. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Belakang tak buka. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Okay, finish.
Okay, thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much. Terima kasih semua rakan-rakan menonton.
Simon, Mazuki.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
Tanya.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you,
Simon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Naida. Thank you, Arya.
Thank you, Prof. Simon.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof. Simon.
Thank you, Prof. Simon and Dr. Mazuki. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you again, Prof. Simon.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof. Simon.
Thank you, Prof. Simon and Dr. Mazuki. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you again, Prof. Simon.
Thank you, Prof, for the sharing.
Thank you.
Sal, apa khabar? Simon, we have 260 something.
Yeah, that's great. So I'll you want to talk on what's that?
I can't hear you because my stuff. Open the microphone so that the sound become like in a glass.
Do you want to talk on WhatsApp?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll say goodbye and bye everybody. And we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. See you again.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
See you in WhatsApp.
Thank you, Dr.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye semua. Terima kasih.
See ya.
Thank you. Thank you.
See ya.
Terima kasih semua.
Nak log out ni.